The Bachelor Party, 1953. Directed by Delbert Mann. Associate producer Gordon Duff. Produced by Fred Coe. Act 1. Fade in. Interior. The one room of a 1.5 room apartment in a low-income housing project in Jersey City, New Jersey. It is early morning, but the shades are drawn and the room is dark. The camera moves slowly across the room over the large double bed on which Charlie and Helen Sampson, a couple in their late 20s, are sleeping. They are sleeping more or less on their sides, facing away from each other. One of Helen's pajama-clad legs projects from under the light covers. We close in slowly on Charlie's sleeping face. The alarm clock at a distant end of the room suddenly bursts into a relentless buzz. Charlie's eyes open. There is a muffled movement at his side, and Helen gets up on one elbow. Then she sits up, rises, and pads barefooted, a rather pretty girl in rumpled pajamas, to the alarm clock and turns it off. Charlie's head turns on the pillow so that he can watch her. She pads back to the bed now and stands at the foot, looking down at her husband. She produces a smile that is more nearly a grimace, then turns and shuffles into the bathroom where she turns on the wall switch. A shaft of light now pours into the bedroom. Charlie sits up in bed. His shoes and socks are on the floor by his feet. He reaches down and starts to put them on. Suddenly, from the recesses of the bathroom, Helen's rather vague soprano bursts into song. "Ramona, I see you by the garden wall." Here it stops as abruptly as it began. Charlie's head slowly turns to look to the bathroom, then back again to the business of putting on his shoes. His face is expressionless, but there is no mistaking the sodden distaste he has for the world today. He pushes his feet into his shoes and just sits there, head hanging, shoulders slumped. Behind him, the sudden noise of rushing tap water, then off. Then his wife comes back into the bedroom. She is carrying a bath towel with which she is drying her face. Finished, she drops the towel on the bed and begins to dress. She is in a position now where most of her is obscured from the camera either by the footboard of the bed or by Charlie's unmoving slumped figure. A moment later, she pads around the corner of the bed to Charlie's front. She is still barefooted and wears her pajama top, but she has exchanged the trousers for a slip. Charlie hasn't moved a muscle since the Herculean effort required to put his shoes and socks on. Helen, you think it's too early to call my mother? Charlie shrugs without looking up. Helen goes out of the bedroom. We stay on Charlie, slumped, unmoving, looking down at his hands dangling loosely between his knees. We hear a phone being dialed in the foyer. Off. A pause. Then Helen's voice. Helen. Off. "Hello, Ma? Did I wake you up? This is Helen. Well, I'll be going to work in about 20 minutes, and I wanted to get a hold of you before I left. I called you last night. Where were you and Pop anyway? I kept calling you every half hour up till 1 o'clock. Oh, yeah? Did you have a nice time?" We slowly close in on Charlie's face, eyes closed. Helen. "Well, listen, Ma, I got something to tell you. I'm pregnant." "Yeah, pregnant." "Of course I'm sure." "Yeah, Dr. Sloan, yeah, he said I was pregnant. 3rd month. He says I can expect the baby next February." "Well, Grandma, act a little excited, will ya?" "You bet I'm excited." "You bet I'm excited." Close up, Charlie. The bowed head rises slowly, the eyes open. He stares abstractedly ahead for a moment. Then he sighs a profound sigh. Then his eyes close again, and the head slowly sinks back to its previous objection. Dissolved to interior. The kitchen of same apartment. Helen is sitting at the small table, carefully sipping a cup of coffee. She is reading yesterday's newspaper. At the same time, she hums snatches of Ramona. Charlie enters the kitchen. He is wearing his trousers now, but hasn't put on his shirt yet. He sits down at the other end of the table and begins to sip a cup of coffee that has already been poured for him. They sit silently a moment, Helen reading and sipping, Charlie studying the coffee in his cup. Charlie. A guy in my office is getting married Sunday. Helen, without looking up. Yeah, which one? Charlie. Arnold. I told you about him. The guy who's got the sick mother. Helen. Oh, yeah. Charlie. The rest of the guys are giving him a bachelor dinner tonight. Helen, looking up now for the first time. Do you want to go, Charlie? Charlie. No, I don't want to go. Helen. Your cousin Julie is supposed to come over tonight, but I can call him up, tell him we won't. Charlie. These bachelor dinners get kind of wild sometimes. Everybody gets loaded. The whole philosophy is that it's the poor groom's last night before he goes into the electric chair. So it gets kind of wild. Helen. That's a good philosophy to start a marriage with. Charlie. Well, you know, a bunch of guys get together, they like to tear up the town a little. Helen looks back to her newspaper, frowning a little. Then she looks up at Charlie again. Helen. Maybe you ought to go, Charlie. Charlie. No, they asked me. I told them I didn't want to go. Helen. It might do you good to have a night out. I know you're upset about the baby. Charlie. I'm not upset. Helen. Come on, Charlie. I know how you feel. Listen, you don't have to pretend you're excited about having a baby. We weren't figuring on a kid right now, and it's a shock. Listen, I wasn't exactly overjoyed when I began to suspect I was pregnant. I said, oh boy, that's all I need, a baby. I had some bad days before I told you. I thought of all kinds of things. I'm ashamed to tell you what I thought of. I was real scared of having a baby. Then I said to myself, if I'm having a baby, I'm having a baby. That's all there is to it. And I began to like the idea. We're going to have a family, Charlie. We're going to have a family. I like the idea. Charlie. Well, there must be something wrong with me, Helen. Because all I can think about is that it's going to cost a lot of money and we're going to be really tied down. Helen. Sure, I know. A baby takes up all your time. Charlie. We were going to buy a car this year. We were going to go for a trip to Canada. We never even had a real honeymoon. 3 days in a New York hotel. What kind of a honeymoon is that? I'm old-fashioned. I want to see Niagara Falls. Helen. We'll get there. Charlie. How are we going to get there? The car's out the window now. You know that. The guy in the grocery told me it costs about $700 to have a baby. Helen. So we'll go to Niagara Falls in 10 years. It isn't going to stop falling. Charlie. All right. Helen, you're right. I know you're right. Give me a couple of days to get used to the whole idea. I'll be all right. Helen. I know you will, Charlie. Charlie. Right now it just seems that I got a ball in the chain hanging from every arm. Helen. I know, Charlie. That's why I think you ought to go to this bachelor party tonight. Get a little high. Laugh it up with your friends. Charlie, bursting out. I don't want to go to this bachelor party. He looks down at his coffee, embarrassed at the outburst. I'm sorry I yelled. Helen. Don't worry about it. Charlie. I'm sorry I yelled like that, Hecky. Helen. What are you sorry about? Don't I yell at you all the time? We stay on Helen. She reads her newspaper, but there is a faint frown on her face. Cut sharply to, The Jersey City entrance to the Hudson and Manhattan tubes. 8:30 in the morning, crowds of people pouring down into the subway. Cut to the Hudson and Manhattan subway hurtling along through its dark tunnel. Dissolved to interior of a crowded subway car. The camera pokes along between the bodies of the strap hangers, comes to a halt on Charlie and another young married fellow, who are silently sitting, each with his hands folded in his lap. The friend, whose name is Kenneth Holman, is neatly dressed in collar tie and seersucker suit. Charlie has conceded more to the August heat. His jacket is folded across his lap. His collar is open, his tie loosely knotted. In short, two young white-collar workers on their way to work. Hanging on to a strap, directly in front of them is a full-blown young woman. Sitting to Kenneth's right is a pretty girl in her early 20s reading a newspaper. The two young husbands ride silently along for a moment, swaying in accordance with the train's movement. Kenneth ventures a quick look up at the girl swaying in front of him, then quickly looks down to his hands. After a moment, he turns his head a little towards Charlie and speaks. Kenneth. Charlie, you ever think about other women? Charlie considers the question for a moment. Charlie. What do you mean, do I ever think about other women? Kenneth. I mean, you're walking along in the street and some nice-looking girl walks by. I mean, do you ever think, hey, that's a nice-looking girl? Charlie considers again. Charlie. Why? Kenneth. Well, just because we're married don't mean we can't appreciate a good-looking girl when we see one. Charlie looks up at the girl swaying in front of them and down again. They ride along silently for a moment. Kenneth. You going to Arnold's bachelor dinner? Charlie. I don't think so, Kenny. Kenneth. Yeah, I was gonna go, but I think I better not. Because my kid, the young one, the girl, she's been acting up again lately. The doctor says she's got an allergy. They don't know what. Charlie. These bachelor parties get a little out of hand sometimes. Eddie Watkins is making all the arrangements. If I know Eddie, he's probably lined up a whole bunch of chorus girls. Kenneth. Yeah? Do you think so? Charlie. You know Eddie. Kenneth. Boy, he really lives it up, don't he? Did you see that blonde he picked it? Did you see that blonde who picked him up for lunch last week? Boy, sometimes I wish I was a bachelor. This last sentence came out a little unpremeditatedly, and both young husbands are embarrassed. Well, you know what I mean. I've been married 6 years and I never seem to get out of the house anymore. You know what I mean? So about once a week I go to the movies with my wife. We never even see the whole movie because my wife starts worrying about the kids. My youngest kid, the girl, she's allergic to something. We've been trying to find out what it is. Anyway, it seems I never see anybody anymore. Do you know how long it is since I've seen Willie Duff? I haven't seen Willie in about 6 months. My wife can't stand his wife. You ever meet her, Willie's wife? Charlie. No, I didn't know Willie too well. Kenneth. Boy, wait till you'll get kids, boy. You'll never get out of the house. Charlie. My wife's pregnant now. Kenneth. No kidding. Charlie. Yeah. Kenneth. Congratulations. The two young husbands look down again at their hands and ride along silently. Kenneth sneaks a quick look up at the girl swaying in front of him. Then his eye is caught by the girl on his right who is reading a newspaper. He slowly looks over at her. At this point, a young fellow of about 26 elbows his way down through the crowded aisle until he spots the girl to Kenneth's right. Pauses, crowds in next to the young woman swaying in front of Kenneth, grabs the strap, and, chewing gum determinedly, stares brazenly down at the girl reading the paper. The girl reading the paper, after a moment, becomes conscious of the young fellow ogling her, looks up quickly. The young fellow smiles pleasantly. The girl looks right back at her paper. Kenneth nudges Charlie. Charlie. What? Kenneth. Dig this guy standing here. He's trying to pick up the girl here. Charlie leans a little forward and looks across at the young fellow and the girl. The former is chewing away and the girl is reading with rigid nonchalance. Charlie. Yeah? Kenneth. Was you with us about 8 years ago when I picked up that chick in Paterson, New Jersey in front of the bus stop? Charlie. When was this? Kenneth. Yeah, you were there. You were with that girl from Brooklyn. We just come from Palisades amusement park and we were driving Frankie Klein's girl home. And the car broke down right in the middle of Route 1. Charlie beginning to smile. Oh yeah. Kenneth beginning to laugh as he recalls the incident. And Frankie opened up the hood and the water cap blew right up in the air? Charlie smiling. And the cop come over? Kenneth giggling so hard now he has to hide his face in one of his hands. That's right, the cop. He thought Frankie shot off a gun. He was going to pull us all in. He sits in his seat, muffling his giggle under his hand, his shoulders shaking with hidden laughter. Oh, man. Charlie. Oh, Frankie, he was funny. Kenneth, controlling himself, letting his hand fall back to his lap. An air of almost poignant memory settles on his face. Oh, that was a lot of fun those days. He looks lazily over to the girl on his right. She is looking up over the top of her newspaper at the young fellow. They are now staring steadfastly at each other. Kenneth turns back to Charlie. Kenneth. Hey, this guy's making out all right. She's giving him the eye now. Charlie. No kidding. Kenneth. I bet you he picks her up before we hit New York. Somehow this has a sobering effect on the two young husbands. Again they sit silently as the train buckets along. Charlie, frowning down at his hands. I don't know, Kenny. I've been feeling pretty miserable the last couple of weeks. It seems to me a really crummy life ahead of me. It just seems like I go to my job every day, and I come home, and we eat dinner, and then we go see Helen's mother and father, or my mother and father, or my cousin Julie and her husband. And now we got this kid coming. This is what the rest of my life is going to look like, is going to be like. I'm going to be a bookkeeper for $72 a week the rest of my life. I don't know. Sometimes I look at Helen. And she's a nice girl and all that. She's pretty. But I feel I'm missing something. I look at Helen, I say, I must have felt something special to marry this girl. Something beautiful. You know what I mean? I mean, I love her and all that, but what's love? You know what I mean? He is quite nervous now at the turn his inarticulateness has taken. He breaks off abruptly. He sits frowning and disgruntled. Charlie, listen, I hope I don't give you the idea that I don't love my wife. I love Helen. Let's get that straight. Kenneth. Well, I hope I didn't give you the idea I don't love Alice. Alice and I get along fine. They sit silently again. The train hurtles along and then suddenly slows as it approaches New York. There is a rustle of movement among the passengers in the subway car. A few people start edging toward the doors. The girl, at Kenneth's right, folds her newspaper and rises almost directly in front of the young fellow's face. They regard each other steadily. The young fellow, to the girl. Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Canal Street and 6th Avenue? The girl. Just follow the signs. You'll see them all over. The young fellow. Are you getting out here? The girl. Yes. The young fellow. Well, I'll follow you then. That'll be easier if you don't mind. The girl. No, not at all. They start to crowd down the aisle in front of the two young husbands, who are following this interchange with deep interest. The heads of both young husbands turn slowly to watch their passage to the door. Then both young husbands look front again and just sit, both wearing expressions of the most poignant wistfulness. Fade out slowly. Cut to interior of a moderately large office containing about 7 girls and an odd number of young men at desks. The girls are typing away. We hear the click and clatter of a busy office staff. Cut to ground glass door, gilt lettering, bookkeeping department. Cut to interior of office, bookkeeping department, small office, typical, filing cabinets, etc. 4 desks, window. 3 of the desks are occupied. At the most downstage desk sits Kenneth, bent over his chores. At the most upstage desk sits Charlie. He has a sheaf of purchasing orders in front of him and a large ledger into which he transfers the totals from the purchasing orders. Occasionally, he makes use of a small adding machine at his right elbow. At a desk stage left of Charlie's desk sits a man in his late 30s, balding, a little stout. He too is bent over ledgers and statements. They are all in their shirt sleeves but wear ties. Throughout the ensuing scene, they never stop their bookkeeping, hardly even look up from their books. The 4th desk is empty. For a moment, the scene is one of industrious silence except for the occasional quick clatter of an adding machine. The bookkeeper, without looking up from his work. You guys going to Arnold's bachelor party tonight? Kenneth, without looking up. No, I ain't going. Are you? The bookkeeper. No, I'm not going. I was going to go, but my wife's father came in from Akron, and he's only going to be here another couple of days. My wife bought tickets to the Radio City Music Hall. My father-in-law gave us $1,000 when I had my appendicitis last year, so the least I can do is go to Radio City Music Hall with him. Charlie. It looks like nobody's going to Arnold's party. The bookkeeper. You ain't going? Charlie. No, I ain't going. Kenneth. Eddie's going to be mad. Charlie. I told Eddie last week I couldn't make it. I mean, Eddie's a bachelor. It's okay for him to go rooting around town, picking up girls. The bookkeeper. Yeah, you get married, you give that kind of thing up. Kenneth. Yeah, Charlie says Eddie had a whole bunch of chorus girls fixed up for us tonight. The bookkeeper's head comes up for the first time. The bookkeeper. No kidding. Charlie. I didn't say that. I just said that if I knew Eddie, we'd probably wind up with some of his crazy girlfriends. The bookkeeper looks back down again at his work. Kenneth. I don't know where he gets all these girls. He's a screwy-looking jerk. The bookkeeper. Did you see that blonde that was up here looking for him last week? Kenneth. Yeah, he told me she was a television actress. I think I saw her on Martin Kane once. Some lunatic was trying to strangle her with a necktie. The bookkeeper. I'd like to strangle her with a necktie. Kenneth. Now, Walter, an old married fellow like you shouldn't talk that way. The bookkeeper looks up from his work, contemplates the wall in front of him. The bookkeeper. I get real jealous of Eddie sometimes. He's as free as a bird. Did you ever see that convertible he's got? You ought to see the old heap I got. He walks out of here on payday. He can spend the whole works on having himself a good time. I walk out of here and I got 3 kids and a wife, all with their palms out. I lost $2 playing poker at my house last week. It was an economic catastrophe. My wife didn't sleep all night. Frowning, he looks back to his work, then he looks up again. Look, the jerk is 20 minutes late. If the boss walked in now, he'd fire him. What does Eddie care? So he scrambles around for another job. If that ever happened to me, I'd be afraid to go home. He turns back again to his work. They work silently for a moment. Then the door opens and a young man of 28 enters. He is bespectacled, yet groomed in that Ripley clothes fashion that bespeaks the gay young blade about town. This is Eddie Watkins, but in the script he shall be known as the Bachelor. At the moment he seems to have had very little sleep the night before. His eyes behind the wire-rimmed glasses are heavy-lidded. A cigarette dangles listlessly from his mouth. There is a perfunctory exchange of hellos and good mornings, establishing that this is Eddie. He shuffles warily to his seat. The Bachelor, muttering through reluctant lips. The boss come in yet? Kenneth. No. The Bachelor sits down at his desk, puffs his cigarette automatically for a moment. Then he reaches over to a pile of telephone directories on the floor beside his desk, pulls up the Manhattan one, flips through the pages, finds the number he wants. He picks up the phone. The Bachelor. Mary, give me an outside line. He pauses, checks the number again in the telephone directory, then dials. Waits. Hello, is this Leathercraft on Madison Avenue? This is Mr. Watkins. I was in about a week ago. I ordered a military set and a wallet. They were supposed to be ready today. Yes. Please, would you? He begins to search his jacket pockets while he waits. Finds a piece of paper, pulls it out. Yeah, a military set and a wallet. That's right. The following inscription should be written on them. On the military set, to Arnold, best wishes on your marriage. From Alex, Charlie, Eddie, Jerry, Kenneth, Mary, Olga, Phyllis, Walter, and the boss. Now, on the wallet, you what? Yeah, that's right. The boss. Now, on the wallet, the following inscription. To my best friend Arnold from his best man, Eddie. No, to my best friend, Arnold. That's right. From his best man, Eddie. Now, can I come in at lunch and pick them up? Okay. Now have them ready because I only got half an hour for lunch. Okay. Hangs up. Sits listlessly, puffs at the cigarette. He rubs his eyes with 2 fingers to clear his head. In front of him, behind him, and to his side, his 3 colleagues bend to their work. He picks up the phone again. He picks the phone up again. The Bachelor. Mary, give me an outside line. He waits, dials, waits again. Miss Frances Kelly, please. I think it's room 4. The 3 heads around him slowly look up from their respective work. Naked interest manifest on their faces. The Bachelor. Hello, Frances? This is Eddie. All right, wait a minute. Give me a chance to explain. I know I woke you up, but if I didn't call you now, I would probably forget, and then there'd really be a hassle. Well, let me tell you what happened. You know I'm supposed to be the best man at this fellow Arnold's wedding. So I called him up last night because I didn't know whether I was supposed to wear a tuxedo or tails. Well, he didn't know, so he said, come on over to my girl's house with me tonight. They're making all the arrangements for the wedding now. So I called you and left a message at the desk saying I couldn't get over till about 10 o'clock. All right, that's what I'm going to explain. He holds the receiver against his chest and looks around at his colleagues with an air of a man whose patience really is being tried too much. He returns the receiver to his ear and listens for a moment. The Bachelor. All right, so I had to go over to Arnold's girl's house with Arnold last night. Well, there was about 30 people there. Man, you never saw such a crazy mess. Apparently the girl is off again. The bachelor waits with infinite patience again. All right, Francis, are you finished? All right. There was about 30 people over there, and they're having a real hassle. There was this little short bald-headed guy there. He's the bride's uncle. He's come all the way down from Boston with his whole family to go to the wedding. The only trouble is he wasn't invited. Well, this crazy uncle, he grabs a hold of me and he starts shaking me by the lapels. So I said, "What do you want from me? I ain't the groom. I'm just trying to find out whether I'm supposed to wear a tuxedo or tails." So I said to Arnold, "I'm cutting out of this madhouse." So they said, "Wait just a couple of minutes because we're going to have a rehearsal." You'd think they were being married on television. The bachelor breaks into a smile. Funny, huh? Look, Francis, I gotta go to work now. I'm calling you from the office. How about letting me make this up to you? I'll take you out Saturday night. I can't make it tonight. The bachelor party's tonight. All right, Saturday night. It's a date. Help me. I swear, right on time. 8:30, okay? We'll have a ball. Goodbye. Go back to sleep. He hangs up, sits listlessly in his chair again. The three heads around him drop again to their ledgers. With a sigh, the bachelor picks up the phone again. The bachelor. Mary, give me an outside line. What do you mean, personal calls? These aren't personal calls. These are business calls. Well, stop listening to other people's conversations. Give me a line. He gets the line. He dials, waits, then all sweetness. Hello? Who is this, Mrs. Stebbins? This is Eddie. Mrs. Stebbins, I wonder if Edna is awake yet. Could I speak to her? Thank you. The three heads around him come up again, naked envy on every face. The bachelor. Edna, baby, listen. Sweetie, I can't make it again Saturday night. I'm all loused up with this wedding. I'm supposed to be the best man at it. We have to rehearse the ceremony. You'd think they were getting married on television. Yeah, sweetie. Why don't I call you on Monday? Maybe we'll work out something before you go back to California. All right, sweetie. Goodbye. He hangs up, sits a moment, then finally removes the cigarette from his mouth, crushes it in his ashtray, and turns to the three others. The bachelor. Well, what do you say? I'm going to call up Louise and make a reservation for a table for tonight. Who's coming and who isn't? To the bookkeeper. Walter, you're coming, right? The bookkeeper looks down at his ledger. The bookkeeper. Well, I'll tell you, Eddie. All right, I'm coming. To Kenneth. Who wants to go to Radio City Music Hall? Kenneth. Yeah, Eddie, count me in. I'll call the wife. I'll tell her I'll be home a little late. The bachelor. How about you, Charlie? Charlie is frowning down at the sheaf of purchasing orders in front of him. Charlie. I don't think so, Eddie. The bachelor nods, picks up the phone. Mary, give me an outside line and don't give me no trouble. Kenneth. Oh, come on, Charlie. One night, we'll have a ball. The bookkeeper. Sure, Charlie. A man has to bust loose every now and then. Charlie. Angrily. I said I don't want to come. Move in for intense close-up of Charlie, frowning, angry. Over this, the bachelor's voice. The bachelor's voice. Hello. Hello, Louise? This is Eddie Watkins. I'd like to reserve a table for 4 tonight. For 4. Close-up on Charlie right up to the end. Charlie. Hey, Eddie. The bachelor's voice. What? Charlie. Count me in. He immediately bends back to his work, takes his pencil up again. Over this, the bachelor's voice. The bachelor's voice. Louis, make that 5. 5 guys. Yeah, a bachelor party. Fade out. Act 2. Fade in. Exterior. Small restaurant with small but bright neon sign reading Louise. Cut to inside the restaurant. Crowded, villagey Italian restaurant Waiters, chatter, clatter. Cut to the table of the bachelor dinner. Charlie, Kenneth, Walter, Eddie, and a fifth young man of 32. This is Arnold, whom we shall call the groom. He is an amiable, rather ugly young man, reticent almost to the point of not speaking at all. At the moment he is smiling steadfastly and amiably, turning his head from one friend to the other as they talk, enjoying the rare privilege of being liked. The dinner is over. During the ensuing scene, a busboy continues to remove the used dishes. Several large bottles of beer and 2 fists of scotch are on the table. There is a welter of variously assorted glasses. Eddie, Walter, and Kenneth are smoking cigars. Charlie, a cigarette. The groom is not smoking. We have cut into the scene during a jumble of conversation. Walter is talking to Charlie, whose head is bent toward the older man. Kenneth is trying to tell the groom a joke, but the groom's attention is being distracted by the bachelor, who is leaning across the table trying to get Charlie's attention. The bachelor. Hey, Charlie. The bookkeeper, Charlie. So we were stationed right outside Paris, about 8 miles, a town called Chateau. The bachelor. Hey, Charlie. The bookkeeper, to Charlie. So the first night, a whole bunch of us swiped a jeep out of the motor court. We had a feller there who was a tech sergeant in the motor court. Oh, what a character he was. He used to get loaded every night on that vanilla extract. The bachelor. Hey, Charlie. Charlie, what do you want, Eddie? The bachelor. Hey, Charlie, did I ever tell you about the time I was stationed at Buckley Field in Denver and I picked up this girl in Lakeside Amusement Park? The bookkeeper. Hey, Eddie, listen to this story I'm telling Charlie. Hey, Arnold, I'm telling Charlie about the time me and that crazy tech sergeant from the motor court went to Paris. Hey, Kenneth. Kenneth. Hey, what happened to the Giants today? The bookkeeper. Hey, Kenneth, listen to this story. I was stationed outside of Paris about 8 miles. Kenneth. Oh, that Paris. I was there for 2 days. Clubs. You had to beat the woman off with clubs. The bachelor. Hey, Charlie. The bookkeeper. Well, let me tell you what happened. The bachelor. Hey, you know what was a great town for dames? Hamburg. Kenneth. Hamburg. Clubs. Clubs. You had to beat them off with clubs. The bookkeeper. Can you pass me that scotch, will you? The bachelor. Boy, the first night I was in Hamburg, these 2 Fräuleins came walking right in the barracks. So I said to the lieutenant. The bookkeeper, who is mildly lit, suddenly stands and bangs the table mightily with his fist. The bookkeeper, bellowing out, the best fighting outfit in the whole fighting army was the Fighting 104th Infantry Division, General Terry Allen commanding. This brings the jumbled conversation to a halt. The bookkeeper surveys the other 4, looking for signs of disagreement, then sits heavily down. Kenneth. Hey, somebody give Arnold a drink. The groom. No, The bookkeeper, promptly pouring a thick tumbler full. Somebody give Arnold a drink. The groom. I had about 3 or 4. The bachelor, as the bookkeeper extends the tumbler to the groom. Arnold, you have to get loaded. That's your duty. The bookkeeper, thrusting the tumbler under the nose of the vaguely protesting groom. Arnold, I was stationed outside of Paris, about 8 miles. So the first night, about 10 of us hop in a jeep and we start off for Paris. Kenneth. Say, who wants to go to the polo grounds tomorrow afternoon? The bookkeeper. So the 10 of us were piled in this jeep and this crazy tech sergeant was driving. Kenneth. Hey, Charlie, you want to go to the ball game tomorrow afternoon? The groom has been twisting his head from side to side, trying to follow both speakers, never relinquishing his polite smile of interest. The bachelor. Arnold, drink up. This startles the groom into swallowing down the tumbler. The others halt in their stories to watch the process. The bookkeeper. 1 gulp, Arnold, 1 gulp. The bachelor. That's my boy. The bookkeeper. Boy, I put about 8 ounces in that one. Charlie. Don't drink it too fast, Arnold. Kenneth. That's all right, Arnold. That's all right. The groom finally sets the tumbler down empty and sits, the smile gone from his face, his chest heaving heavily. The bachelor. You okay, Arnold? The groom brings his hand to his face and rubs his brow lightly. Arnold, you want some water? The groom smiles wanly. The bachelor. You okay, Arnold? The groom weakly. Man, that crazy whiskey. The bachelor beaming. Sure, Arnold's all right. Move in fast for big close-up of the bachelor crying out. The bachelor. Man, we're having a ball. Hold on, the broadly smiling close-up of the bachelor. Cut to kitchen of Charlie's and Helen's apartment. Helen is standing in front of the laundry part of the sink, washing her things. She has on a house smock, and her sleeves are rolled up. Seated at the small table behind her is a second young wife, Julie, Charlie's cousin. She's smoking. Julie. Yeah, so? Helen, washing away. Well, he's worried about the baby. He's worried I'm gonna have to quit my job. Charlie's a big worrier, but he'll be all right. I know Charlie. He thinks everything out, and then one day he wakes up and he's all full of jokes again. Julie. My husband Mike, during the entire 9 months, he acted like he was ashamed of me. I never forgave him for that. He used to walk a couple of steps in front of me in the street, as if he didn't know who that woman with the stomach was. Helen. Well, Mike was just a kid when you had your first baby, Julie. How old was he? 22? He was a baby himself. But Charlie is a pretty intelligent guy. This just came as a big shock to him. And he's been generally feeling kind of low lately, but he'll be all right. Julie. Well, I wouldn't let my husband Mike go to a bachelor party. Helen. What can they do? Get a little drunk? Charlie doesn't drink anyway. Julie. Are you kidding? Helen. What do you think they're going to do? Find some girls in the street? If some girl came over to Charlie, he would sit there, frowning and thinking it all out for about an hour, and then he'd get up and he'd say, Well, miss, I really don't think so. She turns from her washing to Julie, smiling now out of deep fondness for her husband. He's so sweet, you know? I guess this is the way you get when you're having a baby. Everything and everybody seems rosy to you. I look at Charlie sometimes, and he looks handsome to me. I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I looked down at him. He looks so sweet. So I pushed him a little. So he says, What? His eyes are still closed. He's still sleeping. I said, Charlie, you love me? So he wakes up now. So he says, Something the matter, honey? So I said, How much do you love me, Charlie? So he says, his eyes are half closed. He can hardly keep awake. He says, What do you mean, how much? What do you want me to do? Write you out a profit and loss statement? He's a bookkeeper, you know. I thought that was funny. Don't you think that's funny? Julie. Yeah. Helen. It sounds stupid now, but in the middle of the night like that, he was half asleep. It sounded so funny. I just lay in bed giggling for about an hour. Turns back to her wash. Stares down at the suds, somehow deeply moved. I'm crazy about him. Julie. Well, you only been married 3 years. Wait till you've been married 11 years like me and Mike. Helen. Nobody knows how nice he really is. My brother died in Korea. He used to stay up with me every night till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I used to cry all night, and he used to sit on the bed and talk with me. He only had 1 year of college, but he's really very smart. I used to look at him talking there and I used to think, what would I do without this sweet guy here? I'd go crazy. Julie. My husband comes home from work. He pulls out his paper. That's the last word I hear out of him all night. Helen. As hard as I try, I just can't picture Charlie getting drunk and picking up some tramp in the street. I think I'd kill myself if I ever thought he was with another girl. The phone rings in the foyer off the kitchen. Helen turns, still a little bemused. It rings again. This returns her to reality. She takes her hands out of the suds, holding them up like a surgeon. Helen. Julie, give me that towel there, will you? Julie hands her a kitchen towel, and Helen crosses to the foyer, drying her hands as she goes. The foyer is unlit, but there is ample light pouring in from the kitchen. The telephone, little telephone table. It rings again. Helen sits down beside the table, picks up the phone. Helen. Hello? Smiles gently. Hello, Charlie. Where are you calling from? You sound like you're having a nice time. Oh, you're having a ball, huh? Well, what time do you think you'll be coming home? Cut to Charlie in a telephone booth. He obviously is having a ball. He is smiling broadly. Charlie. Well, that's what I'm calling you about, honey. I think a couple of the guys are taking off now. I think Kenny's going. His kid's sick. But I was wondering if you wanted me home for any particular reason. Cut back to Helen sitting in her foyer. Helen. Just a minute, Charlie. She rises, goes to the kitchen door, still holding the phone. She leans into kitchen to Julie. Excuse me, Julie, it's Charlie. A little embarrassed, she closes the kitchen door. The foyer is quite dark now. She goes back to the telephone table, sits down, wipes a lock of hair back. Helen. Charlie? Charlie, come on home now. I miss you. No, I feel all right. I just miss you. Julie's here and we were talking about you. And I just miss you. Oh, come on. Frowns a little. Well, no, if you're having such a good time, stay out and enjoy yourself. No, Charlie, I don't want you to come home if you're having a good time. I'm not lonely. Julie's here. We're talking. I'm washing my things. I know, Charlie. That's what I told you this morning. You finally got one night off for yourself. I don't want you to feel guilty about it. Charlie, do you love me? You sound angry. That's why I ask. No, come home anytime you want. She wets her lips nervously. Charlie. She lets her head sink down onto the palm of her free hand. Charlie, there's no girls at this party, is there? I'm not checking up on you, Charlie. I just miss you. That's so... All right. Charlie, please, I don't want to argue with you. Julie's in the kitchen. All right, Charlie, have a good time. Just stay out as long as you want. All right, Charlie. Goodbye. She slowly hangs up the receiver, sits slumped and abject. All the buoyancy she had at the beginning of the scene evaporated. Cut to Charlie in the phone booth. The broad grin has disappeared from his face. As seen through the closed glass doors of the booth, he is a very sullen and despondent young man. He stands now, pushes the doors open and marches, frowning, out of the booth. Cut sharply to the restaurant table. The bookkeeper, the bachelor, and Kenneth. They are on their feet. The groom is mildly tight and smiling vacantly. We come into the scene as the bachelor is shouting. The bachelor. Where are you guys going? You're breaking up the party. This is just the shank of the evening. The shank. The bookkeeper. I told my wife I'd meet her at the Radio City Music Hall. The bachelor. The Radio City Music Hall? How bourgeois can you get? You men terrify me. You absolutely terrify me. Can't you get one night off from your wives? What are you rushing home for? What's so special in your home? You got a floor show every night? Who are you guys married to? Linda Darnell? Sit down. We're just starting. Hey, waiter. Kenneth. Eddie, we gotta go. My kid's sick. The bookkeeper. Yeah, we gotta go, Eddie. To Arnold, who musters a smile for him. Arnold, since I ain't gonna see you again before the marriage, congratulations and best wishes in the coming future to both you and the bride. Kenneth. Yeah, Arnold. Many happy returns. The groom. Thanks a lot, fellas, for coming, and thanks for the presents. I never expected anything like that. He is genuinely subtly touched. Tears well in his eyes. He contrives to stand, if a little shakily. The groom. I mean it. I really mean it. This night has been one of the nicest things that ever happened to me. The bachelor, smiling. Boy, Arnold is really loaded. The groom. I mean it. This was the first party that was ever given to me in my whole life. I never even had a birthday party. I appreciate this. The bachelor. All right, Arnold. All right. Helps Arnold back into his seat. The groom. I want to thank you, fellows. Kenneth. That's all right, Arnold. The groom. I really mean it. I want to. The bachelor. All right, Arnold. Stop thanking them. They just ate dinner with you. They didn't elect you president. Charlie comes into view. Kenneth. We're going, Charlie. You going? Charlie. No, I don't think so, Kenny. The bachelor. Well, we got one man here who still has his hair in his blood. Muttering. Radio City Music Hall. A bunch of tourists I got for friends. To Kenneth and the bookkeeper. Well, so long, you dragons. Arnold, me, and Charlie, we're going to have a ball, right, Charlie? Close up. Charlie. Charlie. Right. Dissolved to a bar, fairly crowded. As we dissolve in, a strong though tremulous and not always on-key baritone voice is singing a high school alma mater. Pull back to show that the groom is singing. He is sitting suddenly at the bar, with Charlie and the bachelor at his left, both of whom sit restless and scowling, muttering to each other here and there through the song. The groom. DeWitt Clinton. Boom. Clinton. Oh, Clinton, ever to thee. Fairest of high schools, give her 3 times the 3. Oh, fellows, rah, rah, rah. Long may we cherish thee. The bachelor. How did he ever get on this alma mater kick? Charlie. Hey, Eddie, this joint is dead. Let's get out of here. The groom. Faithful will be. Clinton, oh Clinton, for you and me. Da, 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 da. The bachelor. Want to go to Greenwich Village? Charlie. Anything doing down there? The bachelor. A lot of spots down there. The groom. Crash through that line of blue and send the backs around the end. Fight hard for every yard. Clinton's honor to defend. Rah, 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 rah. The bachelor. There he goes with those fullbacks again. Charlie. Angry. Let's go. Dissolve to. Interior, small village nightclub. Tiny dance floor, crowded. Cut to. A small table hedged in by elbows on all sides. Charlie, the bachelor, and the groom. The bachelor is craning his neck, peering around, looking for someone he knows. The groom sort of hangs over him, talking with a desperate urgency. The groom. So what do you think of my girl, Eddie? You saw her last night. Tell me the truth. I mean, be honest with me. I had the feeling you didn't like her. The bachelor. Wait a minute, I think I see someone I used to know. He rises abruptly and exits. The groom. Listen, Charlie, I'd like to ask you a little advice. I mean, you're a married man. This girl I'm supposed to marry. She's all right, but I'm not really attracted to her. You know what I mean? That's important, isn't it? I kissed her a couple of times, but I don't know why I'm getting married, Charlie. Charlie. What did you say, Arnold? The groom. I said, I don't know why I'm getting married. Charlie, I did pretty good for 32 years without getting married. I get along fine at home. My mother's a good cook. I have a nice life. Why do I want to break it all up? Charlie. Well, Arnold, everybody feels that way just before they get married. The groom. Yeah? Did I ever show you a picture of my girl? Charlie. No, you didn't, Arnold. The groom. Do you want to see a picture? Charlie. Yeah, I would. The groom clumsily hauls out his wallet and extracts a picture. He gives it to Charlie, who twists at an angle in order to get some light on it. The groom. I want you to give me your honest impression, Charlie. Tell me what you think of her. She isn't much, is she? Charlie. She looks like a nice, pretty girl to me, Arnold. The groom. Well, I wouldn't say that. We were matched up, you know. I was brought over to her house by my mother and father. Then her mother and father, and my mother and father, and she and me. We sat around the table in the dining room and we settled the whole deal. She's some kind of 10th cousin. We went out a couple of times. She's all right. She's quiet. I kissed her a couple of times. She just sat there and I kissed her. I mean, she didn't respond. What do you think, Charlie? I want to have a girl. I'm human. I've got the same desires everybody else got. So my mother and father, we fixed it up with her mother and father. She's about 4 years older than me. Charlie. Well, that don't make any difference, Arnold. The groom. We're going to live with their mother and father. Do you think that's a good idea, Charlie? I like her, but she ain't much. What do you think I ought to do? Charlie. What do you mean, Arnold? The groom. I mean, you think I ought to marry her? Charlie. Well, Arnold, even if I knew the girl, I wouldn't answer that question. I may not like her, but she may be great for you. The groom. Because I'm thinking of calling the whole thing off. Charlie. It's kind of late for that, ain't it, Arnold? The groom. I'm scared stiff, Charlie. Charlie. What are you scared about? The groom. What am I going to do with her, Charlie? She's one of these quiet ones. I'm not much of a talker myself. Somebody's got to do the talking. What are me and this girl going to do? Just sit there and nobody talking? Charlie. I thought you said you went out with her a couple of times. The groom. Yeah, that's what happened. We sat around, nobody talked. I don't understand marriage, Charlie. What are you supposed to do with your wife? I mean, most of the time. Charlie, thinking. Most of the time, Arnold, you don't even see each other. You're away working. You come home and you eat. Then one of you washes the dishes. Then, if you're not tired, you can go to the movies or visit somebody. Or you watch TV. The groom. I do that now with my mother. This gives Charlie pause. Charlie. I don't know just what there is to marriage, Arnold. I suppose it's to have kids. It doesn't seem like much, does it? My wife's pregnant, in her 3rd month. The groom. That's wonderful, Charlie. Charlie turns slowly to the groom, then looks down at the table. Charlie. Arnold, I've been planning something in my mind a long time. I didn't even tell my wife this. I want to go back to college and get my degree in business and accounting. That was the stupidest thing I ever did, leaving college. What am I now? A bookkeeper. If I had a degree in accounting, I'd have a future. I could become a CPA, have my own office. How am I going to go back to college if my wife's pregnant? She's going to have to quit her job. I mean, somebody's going to have to support the family. I don't think it's so wonderful about this kid. Pause. pause. The groom. So what do you think I ought to do? You think I ought to marry this girl? Charlie, a little angry. Arnold, I can't answer that. The bachelor sidles back into his seat. The bachelor. There was a girl there I knew. She was with another guy, or I would have brought her over. So where do you want to go now, Charlie? Charlie. Angry with the bachelor, Arnold, his wife, himself, the world. Let's go somewheres, for Pete's sake. Let's get drunk or something. You're supposed to be the big lover, Eddie. Where's all the women? What have we been doing? Running from one dumpy nightclub to another, roaming around the city like a couple of sailors. Where's all these beautiful blondes and these fancy tomatoes who live in hotels? Let's do something, for Pete's sakes. The bachelor, likewise shouting, all right, what are you getting mad at? You want to find some women? Charlie, yeah, I want to find some women. The bachelor, all right, let's go find some women. Close in on Charlie, angry, confused, almost trembling. Fade out. Act 3. Fade in. A large wall clock reading 25 minutes to 3. The camera slowly pans down the wall. We are in an 8th Avenue bar. It is almost entirely empty except for the bartender, Charlie, the groom, and the bachelor, who are leaning warily against the bar over their drinks. And a worn, battered old veteran of the streets, a woman in her late 40s, bespectacled, who is perched on a bar stool at the far end of the bar, gloomily reading a newspaper. The camera moves down and in on Charlie, the groom, and the bachelor. The bachelor. I mean, you can't compare the two. This kid, Mantle, how long has he been up? 2 years? What did he hit? 310? 315? Musial led the National League in hitting 6 times. He's having one of the worst years of his career this year, and he's still hitting 320. Musial is an all-time great. This kid Mantle, though, for my dough, he still has to make the varsity. Charlie, mumbling. Yeah, I guess so. The groom, who by now is sodden, leans heavily toward the bachelor. The groom. So what do you think, Eddie? You think I ought to go through with this marriage? The bachelor. If it was me, boy, I'd be in China by now. Leaning across the groom to Charlie. All right, let's take them position by position. Who have the Yankees got on first? 30 guys named Joe. Who's this last guy they pulled up from Kansas City? Trinos or something? Well, I mean, is there any argument? Hodges is the best first baseman in both leagues. Pick up any paper. He's hitting above 320 or something. He's got about 35 home runs. He's driven in over 100 runs already. The groom. With sodden persistence. So, Eddie, what do you think? You think I ought to marry her? Go to China or what? The bachelor. Arnold, if it bothers you so much, call her up and tell her to forget the whole deal. To Charlie. All right, who's on second? Billy Martin or Gilliam? And this isn't even counting Jackie Robinson. Head and shoulders the best second baseman in both leagues if they let him play there. The groom. So, Eddie, the bachelor. Arnold, you're driving me crazy. The groom lowers his heavily steadfast eyes, frowns, and suddenly ponders the top of the bar. The bachelor turns back to Charlie. The bachelor. What's Billy Martin hitting? 250? What's Gilliam hitting? 283? This Gilliam is a flashy fielder, supposed to be even better than Robinson. The groom heavily turns from the bar and moves out of the camera. The bachelor. Don't forget Gilliam gets a lot of bases on balls, and once he's on the bases, man, it unnerves the pitcher. The bartender. From a little down the bar. Yeah, but what's Brooklyn gonna do for pitching? The bachelor turns to the bartender. The bachelor. What's wrong with Erkshire? The bartender. What have you got to compare with Rashi, Lopat, Fort, Reynolds? The bachelor. Reynolds hasn't pitched a full game since last year. The bartender. The best relief pitcher in both leagues. The Bachelor. What's the matter with Billy Lowe's? The bartender. How do you come to compare Billy Lowe's with Reynolds? The Bachelor. What are you, a Yankees fan? A Yankee fan? The bartender. Yeah. The Bachelor. Well, drop dead. Turns angrily back to Charlie. He's a Yankee fan. There is a sudden bellow off. The groom's voice. Hey! Charlie and the Bachelor slowly turn to look in the groom's direction. The camera slowly looks with them, panning across the floor of the bar to the telephone booth opposite. The groom is standing unsteadily in front of it. The groom. I did it. The Bachelor. You did what? The groom staggers a few paces into the center of the empty bar. The groom. I called her up. I told her I wouldn't marry her because I'm having a ball. Then suddenly and effortlessly, he sinks down onto the floor, out cold. For a moment, the Bachelor and Charlie regard the prostrate form. Then they move to him. Charlie. You know, I think he just called his girl and broke his engagement. He kneels down beside the groom. The Bachelor likewise squats beside the body of his friend, and the two young men contrive to lift the groom and get him onto a bar stool following the lines. The Bachelor. Is this what he was yelling about? Charlie. That's what he said. The Bachelor. No kidding. You think he did it because I was needling him there before? You think he took me seriously? I was just kidding. Charlie. Eddie, we better get him home. The Bachelor. Let's not break it up yet. Charlie. It's 3:00 already, for Pete's sakes. The Bachelor. Look at him. He's out cold. Let him sleep it off a little. Charlie. Shaking the groom. Arnold, come on. Wake up. The Bachelor. What do you want to go home for? Charlie. It's going to take us an hour to get Arnold home. He lives up in the Bronx somewheres. By the time I get back to Jersey City, it'll be daybreak. What are you going to do? Stay up all night long? Don't you want to go home sometimes? The Bachelor. What am I going to do home? Everybody's sleeping. Charlie. Well, go to sleep too. The Bachelor. Don't go home, Charlie. I feel like doing something. Charlie. What? Argue about the Yankees and the Dodgers? This is just what we used to do before I got married. The whole bunch of us would wander around the streets making cracks at girls, and then we'd wind up in a bar drinking beer and yelling at each other. Who's got a lower earned run average, Van Lingle Mungo or Tarzan Parmalee? Then we'd hang around the corner because we hate to go home. We were looking, always looking for something. That's what we've been doing all night tonight. Going from one place to another looking. What are we looking for? Go home, Eddie. Go to bed. I'll take Arnold home. Explain to everybody he was drunk. He didn't mean anything. Grips the groom around his shoulders. Come on, Arnold, kid. We're going home now. The groom, who is awake though his eyes are closed, manages to get off the stool, and with Charlie's firm arm holding him, starts for the exit. The Bachelor remains at the bar, covertly watching the two figures making their way down the length of the bar to the door. They exit. The door is shut behind them. For a moment, the Bachelor regards the closed door. And he looks back to his schooner of beer without taking it up. He is profoundly weary. His shoulders slump, his face sags. He runs his hand down his face and shakes his head as if to clear it. He turns and looks down the other end of the bar where the other bar hag sits engrossed in her newspaper. He watches her for a moment. The Bachelor, spiritlessly. Hiya, honey. What are you, a Yankee fan or a Dodger fan? The bar hag slowly turns to regard him over the rims of her glasses. The bar hag. Hiya, honey. Bleakly, the bachelor shuffles slowly down the long length of the bar to where the battered old woman sits. Dissolved to interior subway car as it hurtles along up to the Bronx. It is 3:30 in the morning and the car is absolutely empty except for Charlie and the groom. The groom is sprawled across the straw seat, one leg buckled beneath him, the other on the floor sleeping heavily. Charlie sits expressionless, obviously involved in deep introspection. We hear suddenly the clicking of a woman's high heels approaching. We hear them before Charlie does. At last, he looks up. The camera looks up with him. Slowly ambling down the length of the empty car is a tall, not unpleasant-looking young woman. She sees Charlie in the sprawled room. She ambles along slowly past the two young men, her heels clicking, and takes the corner seat of the straw bench directly under a sign that says, "No smoking." She opens her purse, extracts a pack of cigarettes, takes one, lights it up, puffs deeply, returns the pack, reclasps her purse. Then slowly she turns her head to regard Charlie. Charlie and she exchange a stare for a moment. Then Charlie looks down again to his hands in his lap, frowning. Then he smiles ever so little, and he looks up at the girl and shakes his head no, almost imperceptibly. The girl raises her nostrils with an air of ineffable disdain, rises, and starts for the next car, her heels clicking gradually off into silence. The car buckets along into the night. The groom sleeps, sprawled. Charlie returns to his introspection. Fade out. Dissolved to narrow hallway on third floor of Bronx apartment house. A small overhead bulb provides a thin, sketchy light. We see enough of the corridor to see two apartment doors lettered 3D and 3C. Charlie and the groom enter. The groom is awake now, but miserable. Charlie helps him down the corridor to apartment 3D. They pause outside the door. The scene is played in low mutters and whispers. The groom. Well, thanks a lot, Charlie. Charlie. You okay? The groom. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm a little groggy, but I'm awake anyway. You don't want to come in, do you? Charlie. No, I don't think so. The groom. I think my mother and father are up. I hear voices. My girl must have called them because they wouldn't be up at this hour. Charlie. Will you go on in and tell them you're drunk and you're sorry and you call your girl the first thing in the morning because she must be really upset about this. The groom, who has been listening at his door. I think she's here. Charlie. Who? The groom. My girl. I think I hear her voice in there. Charlie. Well, be nice to her, Arnold. Remember, you woke her up in the middle of the night and probably scared her to death. The groom. Charlie, what should I say to her? Charlie frowns, shuffles a few paces to the railing of the landing, leans against it. The groom moves to him. Charlie. Say to her what you said to me. Tell her you're scared. Tell her you don't think you can be a good husband. Tell her you're afraid you're not going to have anything to say to each other. Tell her everything you're scared about. Everybody's scared, Arnold. Everybody's got things in them they're ashamed of. That's what a wife's for. To make you feel you don't have to be ashamed of yourself. And she tells you what makes her feel miserable. Then that's your job. It's your job to make her feel she's not as bad as everybody makes her think she is. That's what marriage is, Arnold. It's a job. You work at it. You work at it 24 hours a day. It's your job to make that person feel happy. You have to sit and think, how am I going to make that person feel happy? And boy, sometimes you feel tired and you just want to be left alone. And you wish somebody would start thinking about how to make you happy. Then you just got to stop thinking that, because it's your job to make that other person happy. And if your girl is halfway decent, she's going to make it her job to make you happy. Then you get to feel, I can depend on this person. And that's love, man. That's the greatest thing in the world. There's nothing like it. I have moments sometimes with my wife, Arnold. We're just lying sometimes in bed, before you go to sleep. You know how you can get to feel sometimes? What's the sense of working? What's it all mean? What do you get out of this crazy life but people yelling at you all day and trying to save a couple of bucks every week? And then my wife tries to talk to me. She'll say, look, you got a wife who loves you. Your mother, your father, your kid brother loves you. You got friends. Arnold, I don't know how to explain this to you, but that's what my wife does for me. She's the one that makes my life worth living. She's the one that makes life worth living. Tears have welled in his eyes, and he hurriedly puts his hand to his face, shading his reddening eyes. Charlie, having difficulty getting the words out. Arnold, I got a kid coming, for heaven's sakes. That's our kid. I mean, that's what life is, ain't it? What else are you going to do if you don't have a family and kids? That's why we're living. That's what everybody's looking for. He turns away from the groom, crying quietly. The groom stands, a little embarrassed at this display of his friend's emotion. After a moment, he speaks. The groom. Well, I'm going to go in, Charlie. Now, you suggest that I just tell her everything on my mind. Charlie, still hiding his eyes, nods. The groom smiles. Well, at least this girl and I will have something to talk about for a change, because I have a lot of things on my mind. He smiles briefly again. Well, Charlie, thanks for taking care of me. Thanks for the presents you guys bought me. Charlie, you better get in, Arnold. The groom. Yeah, well, I'll see you Monday. No, I'll be on my honeymoon, so I'll see you 2 weeks from Monday. Charlie. All right, Arnold. Have a nice honeymoon. The groom shuffles back to the door of his apartment, rings the bell lightly, takes a deep breath. A moment, and then the door opens. A girl of about 35, bespectacled, rather plain but with a sensitive face, stands in the doorway. She has on a top coat, and her face is drawn in anxiety. The groom stands, his head down in shame. The groom. Hello, Louise. I'm very sorry. Honest. The fiancé. Sure, Arnold. Come on in. She looks anxiously over the groom's shoulder in Charlie's direction. The groom lumbers past her into the apartment. She follows him in. The door closes. Dissolve 2. The door to Charlie's apartment. The apartment is dark. There is the light sound of a key being inserted into the lock. And then the bolt clicks. The door opens. Charlie enters. He closes the door softly behind him, locks the bolt. He moves down the short corridor and turns into the open doorway of the bedroom. Helen lies in bed just as we saw her at the beginning of Act 1, sleeping quietly, one pajama-clad leg projecting from under the covers. Charlie moves a few silent paces into the room and stands, looking down at her. His face has no expression. He takes his jacket off, drapes it around the back of a standing chair. He begins to undo the knot of his tie. Turning, he moves quietly into the bathroom, pulls the door almost shut. A moment later, a sliver of light shoots through the still open part of the doorway. There is the sound of rushing water. Then suddenly, a light tenor voice issues from the bathroom. "Ramona, I see you by the garden wall." It ends abruptly as it started. The singing causes Helen to turn slightly on the bed. She assumes a new position under the covers and buries her head in the pillows. Just the slightest trace of a smile slips across her face. Fade out. The end. The Bachelor Party. The director and the actors. The Bachelor Party is laid out like a short story, a straight chronology of scenes as we follow the course of the party through the evening. The first act has a semblance of normal dramatic structure, but the second act abandons even this pretense, and the third act embarks on an entirely new story. It is frankly not the best structured television script I have read. It played beautifully, however. The excellent reception it received was to a great extent due to the delicate direction of Delbert Mann, and to the acting of the whole cast, especially Eddie Albert, who played the lead. The television director, like the director in other mediums, has a complex and frightening job. On the half-hour show, where there is usually only one director, he is casting and designing next week's show even as he is rehearsing this week's. At the same time, he is reading and approving scripts for shows 3, 4, and 5 weeks ahead. On the hour show, the director rarely sees his script more than a week before rehearsals begin, and usually less. He must cast his show within a few days and on a strictly limited budget. He must start the scene designer on the sets so that they can be constructed and painted in time for the show. He has to have some sort of idea of the layout of the sets even before the scene designer brings in his rough sketches of the floor plan. He has to know where he intends to set up his cameras on each scene so that he can dolly, pan, or cross-shoot without seeing part of the next set. He must detail a full list of props so that the property man can start procuring them. He has conferences with the producer to discuss the show in terms of the program policy. For example, the men from the advertising agency may have wanted the Italian character in the second act changed for fear of offending the millions of Italians in the country, or they may have wanted the ending adjusted so that the young couple decide not to get a divorce but get back together again for the sake of the child. The director then proceeds into rehearsal, where for 7 to 10 days he tries to convey his dramatic interpretation of the script to each actor. He decides on the costumes and the makeup. He chooses the music. He fights with the continuity and legal departments of the network for lines of dialogues that border on the tabooed. 2 days before the show, he sits down with the technical supervisor of the show, the light man and the audio man, and painfully goes over each second of the script, detailing which camera will be where, the sort of lighting on each scene, and the placing of the audio boom so that the incredible melange of machinery on the floor of the studio will not get mixed up. On the day before the show, the director blocks out the show. He sits in the control room with the technical director on his right and the head audio man on his left. Behind him are the music man with his trio of player recorders, the contrast man sitting behind his panel board, and the light man. Down on the floor beneath them, the actors are seeing the sets for the first time. The floor of the studio is laced with innumerable camera and microphone cables. The entire studio is crowded with technical personnel: cameramen, soundmen, lightmen, stagehands, customers, makeup men, and carpenters. The sets stand makeshift and trembling, a third of the living room, the corner of an office, two isolated bus seats, a table, and two wooden chairs, all turned at odd angles to each other with no sense of continuity except in the director's mind. Then, with laborious meticulousness, the director puts the actors through their scenes, checking each line, movement, and cue for camera position. On the day of the show, the director runs a technical rehearsal, then the dress rehearsal, followed by feverish final refinements, and then the show. During the show, the director cues every change, cut, dissolve, music cue, exit, and entrance from his seat in the control room. It is, to say the least, a desperate and anxious hour for him. The director is, furthermore, the father of the production. In the jangled, frenetic atmosphere of a theatrical production, someone has to give everyone else the feeling that everything is all right, that things are moving along well, and that no matter how disturbed the matters seem at the moment, it will all come out fine. Despite this mountain of responsibility, the director's function is essentially an invisible one. He does not get up in front of the audience as the actors do, nor can he claim any vanity from the words of the script as does the writer. Directing is an interpretive job. Most directors who take their work seriously prefer, however, to think of themselves as creative artists. I do not know exactly what a creative artist is. It is, I suspect, a conception worked up by theater people to bolster their own sense of inadequacy in a bourgeois world. There is nothing any more creative in acting, directing, or writing than there is in any other kind of work. Nevertheless, theater people like to think of themselves as creators, and nowhere is this sort of thinking more unfortunate than in the case of directors. In order to identify their work to the audience, so many directors will force their own artistic compulsions on a script. They will dig into the words to find over-heightened theatrical moments and effective camera shots. They will shoot scenes from underneath tables, through the crook of someone's elbow, or between the legs of a herd of cattle. They will involve the actors in the most intricate analysis of their roles, even where such probing is out of perspective with the level of the script. They will find lyric poetry in the simplest moments. They will shroud the whole production in mood. They become more interested in excitement rather than truth, in theatricality rather than reality. Needless to say, the relationship of the writer to the creative director is a delicate one. A director may have the highest regard for the writer's talent, but he will still resent any violation of his province of activity. He will react to the writer's criticisms at rehearsal either by defending himself or by nodding his head quickly in a posture of impatient interest and then promptly going about his own way. Some directors are flatly belligerent, and some, usually the least talented, will improvise on the script, adding new lines and cutting old ones. Since most writers are either barred from or don't bother coming down to rehearsals, this has become almost an accepted part of the director's business. I have never met the director from Elia Kazan down who could cut or rewrite my own scripts better than I could myself. I have also found that most directors take a somewhat different approach to my scripts than I do. We will vary on the tone, mood, and even the meaning of the play. Directors, after all, come to their work with their own highly personalized beliefs and emotions. A director whose mother abandoned him when he was 4 years old is going to have a definite attitude on how to treat the role of a mother in a given script. The homosexual director cannot have an accurate understanding of either the relationship between two men or that between a young man and a young woman. A director may be very impressed by the stark, bare stage sort of drama of the 1930s, or he may impose this attitude on the most conventional comedy. The writer must protect his script against these violations. When I say protect his script, I do not mean like a wounded mother tiger. If there is anything more trying than the arrogant director, it is the defensive playwright. A writer must come into rehearsal leaving any paternalistic feelings he may have for his script behind him. The show, after all, will come out under his name, and he should have only one purpose in his mind, and that is to see that the show comes out on screen as best as it can be done. He must watch each scene as it matures between the actors, searching for moments of untruth or boredom. He must cut with ruthless incisiveness, regardless of how well turned the phrase of dialogue may be. If the director says he cannot make sense out of a scene, the playwright must rewrite the scene. If the actors do not understand a given moment, he must rewrite the moment. The writer should have no concern for his words. He should only be interested in the final playing. Therefore, when a writer protects his script, he is protecting not his lines, but an interpretation, tone, or approach that he considers best for the show. This will take him into the province of the director, but the director should also be approaching the show with this single purpose of making it the best possible one, and he should accept the writer's suggestions. The writer must always negotiate with the director, never with the actors. This is an invaluable tradition of theater and a sound one. There can only be one boss at rehearsals, and that is the director. It is therefore vital that the writer extend himself to get along with his director. The relationship is always difficult, frequently circumspect, and sometimes impossible. If the writer cannot get along with his director, then it is my sincere advice that he shouldn't write for that program again. It is impossible to produce a good show that offers any satisfaction to the writer unless he has a working relationship with his director. I personally depend a great deal upon my director. I do not write literature. I write drama. And drama depends entirely on how it is played, and the only man who can make a script play well is the director. More often than not, the script has holes in it, and a good director can cover them up. Such was certainly the case in The Bachelor Party. I am not sure to this day where the basic approach was wrong, but obviously the line of the story is 6 inches off from the beginning to end, and the third act resolution is hardly an inevitable outgrowth of the preceding 2 acts. The most obvious structural defect lies in the second act, where there is almost no line of graduated movement. The act, which in its published version is much improved over the original draft, consists of a succession of scenes, each a repetition of the preceding one, gathering at best a gradual weight of deterioration. I wanted to show the emptiness of an evening about town, and emptiness is one of the most difficult of all qualities to dramatize. What Delbert Mann, the director, did was to balance each scene delicately, so that the emptiness became heavier and heavier. The act still required some line relating to the other 2 acts, and we decided the line that the first act indicated was the leading character's desire to go to bed with a woman other than his wife. It is impossible to write such blatant adultery in a television script, and even more impossible to write an honest motivation for it. It was up to the director and the actor to convey this basic thought to the audience. It was done with simple stage business and by equality in acting. In the first scene of the act, a girl crossed past Eddie Albert, and he gave her a restless attention throughout the scene. There was nothing conclusive in his looking at the girl, just the first visible stirrings of desire. This desire was irritated by his sense of guilt toward his wife in the telephone call scene, so that when we pick him up again in the high school scene, he is frankly restless, impatient to go to Greenwich Village. In the final scene of the act, his desire erupts into open acknowledgement, and he asks the bachelor to find him a girl. This is a sound, honest line of movement. The second act curtain is the inevitable high point promised by the first act, and it makes the audience willing to sit through a commercial to see the rest of the play. It was not written or even clearly conceived in the script. It was the work of the director that made this act play as sharply as it did. Delbert Mann's finest gift as a director lies in his ability to see the whole show in its proper shape. This is a rare quality in a director. Most directors are fine when they handle the moment at hand. In fact, they are much too concerned with individual beats and theatricalities. They lose the forest for the single trees. The result of this kind of directing is a show jagged and spotted with intensities that spoil the smooth, swift flow of a story. Delbert also has a keen understanding of normal bourgeois life. He is an amiable, middle-class fellow himself who looks rather like a young associate professor of sociology. He does not strike the poses usually associated with a creative director. He does not clasp his brow or plummet into 10 minutes of abstracted silence as he ponders the hidden subtleties of a characterization. Nor does he try to impress the actors by giving them lessons. Most actors actually are not aware that they are being directed by Delbert until the 4th or 5th day of rehearsal. He lets them alone, assuming they are professional people, unless, of course, they violate his basic line of reasoning, or unless they want to discuss their parts. Delbert also has the secure ability to accept my meddling without defending his prestige. If he likes my ideas, he uses them. If he doesn't like them, he says so. Generally, I would say that Delbert is much more interested in what the audience thinks of the show than in what it thinks of him. He is a rare fellow, and I owe him more than I care to acknowledge. The relationship of the writer to the actors is quite a different matter entirely. There are all sorts of actors, many of them highly intelligent or amusing, but as a class they have a poor sense of theater. There are very few actors whose opinion of a script I would trust. They have a thin sense of reality. They are eager to emotionalize any line of dialogue that comes their way. It is only natural for them to play their lines for everything they are worth, and so few of them stop to think of playing the scene as they would in real life. Most young actors today are what is known as method actors. The method is a school of acting that is so broad that it defies definition, but it generally involves a depth of understanding of the role that approaches psychoanalysis. It is based on the Moscow Art Theater, and it is certainly the finest approach to acting that I know of. Method actors are after the inner truth of their roles, that is to say, the deeper motivations of the character, so that the actual lines of dialogue represent far more than what they say. So it is a continual shock to me to see how shallow is the result of their intellectualizing and probing. They still read the simplest improvised lines of dialogue as if they were epic statements. They still whirl and turn on stage with the magnified clarity of a ballet dancer instead of with the mundane casualness of real life. One of the basic rules of acting is to relate to the other people in the scene, but it hardly requires that they stare eye to eye at each other as they say, "Hello, what's new?" The truth of the matter is that many of the method actors are not as perceptive as the method requires them to be. And if they are, they frequently do not have their talent refined enough to play what their intelligence has uncovered. The actor is basically a refined mechanism that can produce the truthful emotion required of a role at a given time. A truthful emotion is a difficult thing to produce. It implies a naked exposure of the actor's own emotions, and most people, including actors, do not like to expose their emotions. A smile does not mean joy, nor a frown mean tragedy. A wealth of complicated inward emotion must be dredged up to produce a genuine feeling of joy or disaster. It requires great skill and long experience. The idea indicated in the film All About Eve that a girl can walk up onto a stage and with no previous experience play a role adequately, let alone with excitement, is ridiculous. Anyone who dreams of becoming a fine actor without years of intensive training and work is fooling himself. Acting is difficult, lonely work. To pick any one actor out as the best in the business is inaccurate, because each actor can play things that other actors can't. Nobody doubts the superb ability of Marlon Brando, but he could not have played Charlie in The Bachelor Party as ingeniously as did Eddie Albert. Eddie Albert has been playing movie juveniles for so long that people have forgotten what a superlative actor he is. Eddie has an advantage over most actors today because he was trained for many years in this precise comedy of the 1930 Broadway stage. His stagecraft is impeccable. His timing is sharp as Jack Benny's. But these are the surface techniques of acting. Under Eddie Albert's casual performance lie layer upon layer of meticulous thinking. In the part of Charlie, he was given only the sketchiest of roles. I conceived Charlie as one of those quiet fellows, thoughtful, pensive, introspective. It is much easier to play an articulate character than an introspective one, for in the latter case, the actor has to achieve his effects by silent relationships. How does an actor let the audience know what he is really thinking unless he can speak words? The bad actor mugs. The competent actor conceives a certain amount of surface detail. I have only a vague idea of what the fine actor does, even though I watched Eddie Albert carefully build his part, thought by thought, gesture by gesture. During rehearsals, Eddie spent hours closeted in corner conferences with Delbert Mann, plumbing into the role, experimenting, improvising. In the mornings, he would come in with fresh ideas that he had dug up overnight. How, for example, does a fine actor convey with no breach of taste and with literal reality the hungry, restless, amorphous desire to sleep with another woman when he won't even admit this desire to himself? The bad actor strikes a facial expression of lust, delivers his line with a broad undercurrent of passion. The good actor digs into himself to remember what he was like under similar or the same circumstances. He tries to recall the precise accuracy of what he looked like, what he was really feeling, how he talked to the others around him, what his attitude toward his wife was, the layers of guilt confused with need. Piece by piece, he reconstructs the moment just as it would be if it were happening to him. Then he improvises the whole moment to himself until he has captured an overall quality. Then he refines it, details it, identifies it for the audience. Eddie Albert's reconstruction of his role in The Bachelor Party was a tribute to acting. I am constantly amazed by what a fine actor can do to a part. Even the best actors, however, require ceaseless guidance. This is the director's job. It is patently not the writer's. If the writer has anything to say, he says it to the director. It is the director's responsibility to drag out of the actors the exact feeling he wants on every line. Each actor has to be approached differently. Each will respond only to a specific image or stimulus. Kim Stanley, one of the most gifted actresses I have ever worked with, seems to work on a purely analytical level. She discusses her role with all the familiar jargon of psychoanalysis. She is, I think, the only actress who can take these academic terms and reduce them to surface effects that the audience will understand. Most psychoanalytical actors can discuss their roles, but cannot produce the delicate edges of reality they have just discussed. Nehemiah Persoff is another actor who is able to make dramatic sense out of an intellectual understanding. Kathleen Nesbitt, who played the leading role in The Mother, gave an incredible performance. To my mind, the best character performance ever done on television, without ever discussing her role beyond the simplest level. Joe Mantell needs 2 words from the director, and he spurts back with the correct refinement. Some actors like to talk their roles a lot. Some of them just do whatever the director tells them. Each actor is a highly individual mechanism, and this ability to use actors for their best is one of the most difficult aspects of directing. The writer should stay away from the actors except to let them know how much he is delighted by them. Actors, like everyone else in show business, need this constant reward. Don't flatter an actor unless he deserves it. But most professional actors, if they are responsive, will give you frequent cause for praise. Other than this, don't meddle with them. Actors will always come up to the writer if he is around rehearsals and try to talk their parts out with them. The writer must refer them to the director. The director has his own idea of how to approach each actor, and advice from the writer will just confuse the actor and diffuse the director's authority. Actors are the only important people once rehearsals start. They are the ones who will be up on the screen, and the entire responsibility for the show is ultimately theirs. They must be made to feel completely comfortable in their roles. If the actor suggests changes in the dialogue because he feels better with these changes, his needs must be granted unless they damage the show, and this is not too frequent. There are really very few basic lines in a script that are vital to the story. Occasionally, there is an actor who rather prides himself on his directing and writing ability, and who will try to take over the show. This is a dangerous situation. Actors have no business writing or directing a show they are in. There is sometimes little you can do except to scream or simply fire the actor. Fortunately, this is not too usual a situation. Actors, for the most part, are cooperative and eager people. There is nothing in show business that I know of to match successful rehearsals. The writer who enjoys his director and has a good cast can have a wonderful time.